Weeks time, I think. I think it's the best record we've ever made, which I don't always believe when you finish. By the time the records come out, I normally find fault with them already.
Picture this. April 2025. Chaos erupts after Elvis Costello's live interview sends shockwaves through the music world. In just a few chilling words, he exposed a long-buried, disturbing clash with Agnetha, ABBA's beloved star, and what he said shattered her perfect image, revealing a darkness no one was ready for. You probably heard of the brief period in the late 70s when punk collided awkwardly with pop. ABBA was at their commercial peak, while Elvis Costello was cutting to the mainstream with razor-sharp lyrics and an acid tongue. But one night in 1979 changed everything. Picture this. A smoky industry party in London, champagne flowing, egos clashing beneath the glittering lights. That's where Costello and Agnetha collided, two worlds that were never meant to meet. At first, it was small talk, but then came the moment. Elvis, always blunt, reportedly sneered at ABBA's polished image, accusing Agnetha of being a puppet. The room fell silent. Witnesses say Agnetha's face went pale. Then she exploded. No one heard what she shouted back, but the tension was nuclear. She stormed out. He didn't follow. The two never spoke again. But what happened in that room festered for decades. Costello admitted the bitterness stayed with him, not just because of the words, but because of what he saw in Agnetha that night. A woman hiding deep insecurity behind icy control. A performer so fragile, so obsessed with perfection, she couldn't bear to be questioned. A star who, despite all her success, radiated loneliness. And that was just the beginning. Agnetha's conflicts weren't limited to her band or the stalker. Off stage, she had a reputation that left many shaken. Over the years, she clashed with key figures in the music industry, particularly during her solo career. Producers whisper behind closed doors about her obsession with control. Recording sessions turned tense. Some left the studio in tears. Others simply refused to work with her again. She rejected major collaborations, including a rumored duet with Phil Collins, claiming she didn't want to share the spotlight or compromise her vision. To some, it was independence. To others, it was pure arrogance. Several well-known Swedish artists accused her of being cold and dismissive. Words like impossible, paranoid, and emotionally unstable floated through industry circles. One of the most explosive meltdowns came in 2004. After years of silence, Agnetha released her much-hyped comeback album, My Coloring Book. Expectations were sky-high. She promised a European promo tour, agreed to press interviews, and then she disappeared. Called in the studio. I heard a rumor that Joey is going to remix it again. I can't believe he's going to be so foolish as to do that, because it sounds really good. I've heard a rough tape of it. After just a few brief appearances, she canceled everything. No explanation. No goodbye. The label was livid. Millions had been invested. Teams were left scrambling. Whispers turned into rumors, panic attacks, breakdowns, shouting matches in hotel rooms. Some insiders claimed she locked herself in and refused to come out. Others said she collapsed backstage in tears, screaming she couldn't do it. At one point, she allegedly threatened to burn the contract and walk away from music forever. What the public saw was a canceled tour. What insiders saw was a woman unraveling. Again, behind the harmonies and glittering stage shows, Agnetha was already caught in a different kind of battle, one with her own band. Her relationship with Bjorn Ulvaeus had collapsed just a few years earlier, ending in a public divorce that was anything but peaceful. Picture this. Performing songs about heartbreak with your ex-husband just a few feet away, night after night, pretending everything was fine. It wasn't. The tension was thick behind the scenes. While Benny Andersson and Annie Frid Lyngstad tried to steer ABBA forward, Agnetha grew increasingly distant. Her refusal to fly due to her fear of airplanes only widened the cracks. She missed promotional tours, skipped studio sessions, and was often labeled difficult by their management. But it was more than just stress. By 1981, she was emotionally unraveling. Think of a woman torn between superstardom and motherhood. While the world celebrated her success, Agnetha was quietly battling guilt and despair over being away from her children. She once said in a rare Swedish interview that every time she left home, her daughter would cry at the window and she would cry on the plane. It haunted her. Her desire to stay close to her kids led to more canceled appearances, strange schedules, and eventually a full retreat from the spotlight. But behind that retreat was also something darker. Rumors swirled in Stockholm's media circles about a breakdown in 1982, just before ABBA's unofficial split. Friends say Agnetha became paranoid, locked herself in her house for days, and grew terrified of public life. Her fairy tale was crumbling, and few people knew how badly she was suffering. When ABBA ended, Agnetha didn't just step back. She vanished. She retreated into the cold silence of the Swedish countryside. Thinking isolation would protect her, she chose the quiet, the trees, the distance from stage lights and applause. But the press didn't let go. They stalked her like wolves, hungry for a glimpse, for a scandal, for any trace of the golden girl who had disappeared. Peace never came. Instead came betrayal. Her short romance with Detective Torbjorn Brander, someone she had trusted during a vulnerable time, turned into a media-feeding frenzy. One day she was in love. The next, her most private moments were splashed across tabloids. He sold her out. Photos, stories, bedroom details. Everything had a price. Agnetha felt humiliated, hunted. Her trust shattered like glass. Her heart slammed shut. But worse was coming. Then entered Gert van der Graaf. At first, he was just a fan, then a face in the crowd, then a shadow that never left. His admiration spiraled into a chilling obsession. He followed her, moved near her, sent her letters laced with devotion and delusion. He stared through her windows. She called the police, terrified. A restraining order came, but he came back again and again and again. He was like a ghost she couldn't exorcise. No matter how many walls she built, he found a way to slip through. She started sleeping with the lights on, pacing at night, checking every lock twice. What had once been a sanctuary became a prison. Her estate, surrounded by gates, alarms, and silence, felt like a cage. Her world became one of shadows and whispers. Imagine being a global star and praying not to be seen. Agnetha, once adored by millions, now lived as a recluse, hidden from the world, haunted by it. Her life was no longer her own. It belonged to fear. The world had celebrated her, but behind the curtain, she was falling apart piece by fragile piece. In public, Agnetha maintained a fragile smile. Her interviews were brief, her appearances rehearsed, her expressions frozen in time. But behind that mask, something was crumbling. The pressure to stay perfect, to be the golden girl the world expected, was ripping her apart from the inside. By 2008, she had vanished from the spotlight. No more reunions, no red carpets, no interviews, just silence. It wasn't diva behavior. It was survival. She had reached her limit. Privately, friends whispered about long nights filled with tears, of panic attacks that left her gasping for breath. She refused to answer calls. Doors stayed locked. Even family members were often kept at a distance. For Agnetha, even speaking to strangers had become unbearable. The world had loved her voice, but never really listened to her pain. And yet, ironically, as she faded into the shadows, her legend only grew brighter. Fans around the globe clung to the image of the innocent blonde from ABBA. They sent letters, flowers, drawings, even poems. Some camped outside her estate, hoping for a glimpse. But they didn't know the real Agnetha, the woman behind the curtain. A woman bruised by fame, betrayed by love, and haunted by a past that refused to let go. She had once stood under the brightest lights. Now she was trying to survive in the dark. So when Elvis Costello opened up this year, he didn't just throw shade. He ripped the curtain off a decades-old illusion. In just a few words, he forced the world to see what had always been hidden in plain sight. That behind Agnetha's crystal-clear voice and flawless image was a woman locked in a constant war. Not just with the press, not just with those around her, but with herself. The Costello confession wasn't just gossip. It was a final crack in the porcelain mask she wore for years. A mask built from smiles, melodies, and a silence so thick it screamed. Suddenly, everything made sense. The breakdowns, the disappearances, the walls she built around herself. What he said echoed like a final verdict on a life buried under fame, fear, and forgotten pain. People gasped. Headlines exploded. Fans were divided. But to those who had watched her vanish from public life, it wasn't a surprise. It was confirmation. Confirmation that the woman who once lit up the world's biggest stages had been screaming in silence all along. And perhaps now, finally, the world is ready to look past the glitter, the gold records, and the legend. To see Agnetha not as a pop icon, but as something far more tragic and real. A survivor of a fairy tale that slowly turned into a nightmare she never truly escaped.